A game development cycle is the most turbulent time of the year. There's a saying when it comes to game development: if all else fails, hire someone to do the job for you and then reap all the benefits for being a sole developer while leaving the poor person in the dust to become a ghost in the industry. I made that one up. But the point is that it's extremely rare for someone to work on a massive game completely and utterly on their own with no assistance whatsoever. And when someone does and releases it to a wide audience, there's a chance that it could turn out really, really good or really, really bad. I've talked about this in my own video, but for the uninitiated, Yandere Simulator is a game that runs on the Unity engine. Before you get your super-powered panties in a twist, I'm not slating the Unity engine itself. Games that are made on the Unity engine, like any other engine, all have varying degrees of quality. You only noticed the bad asset flips because the developers didn't have enough money to remove the watermark at the beginning of the game and have to hang their heads in shame as the dreaded grey screen shows up saying that yes, this game is indeed made on the Unity engine. Going back to Yandere Simulator, and the most common complaint about the game was that it runs like an athlete in co-op, but he's got a third leg protruding from his stomach and he runs by constantly front flipping down the track, and the buttons also included the mouse keys on the side. The game was horrible to run even on a beast rig. Loading up into the lobby and you're greeted with less frames than viewers on the standard mixer stream, and all you could really do to keep your PC from bricking itself was look at the floor. Of course, this spells problems for the casual player with a less than stellar PC and significant lack of YouTube money, as opening the game would open your entire town to nuclear destruction. There are quite a few reasons why this is an issue, especially in Yandere Simulator, but the biggest one goes down to the way the game's being programmed by the dev. If you looked at the game without any knowledge as to its background or how it was even created, you'd probably think that it could easily run on a calculator, but if you played it, you'd probably be lucky to get a frame in. But why is this? I touched upon this in my own video, but if there was one thing YandereDev wasn't really the best at, it was programming his game properly to work efficiently and on all devices. The code looked like a complete nightmare. It was like the whole concept of variables was unheard of to him. Before you guys brandish your pitchforks and call for my public execution for being mean about his coding when he never had any experience before, let me explain why a lot of people take a big issue with this programming. Yandere Simulator has been in active development for about 5 to 6 years, and he's been programming the game the entire time when he wasn't live streaming video games or making more videos explaining the lore. He's being paid the same wage, if not more, than professional programmers who by now would have completely finished the game and done several patches to it and released it on the Nintendo Switch and Nokia Brick. He's commented that he knows his code looks awful and that he only codes on areas that aren't used frequently. If he's saying that, then that means he clearly knows how to code properly, so why isn't he doing it? The code looks like a complete mess! In the code, he uses the update function, and he fills it to the brim with things that the game will do at that specific point. The problem is that with this function, said things would run every single frame. I can go into more detail about the coding, but several programmers have made comments and points about it, so I'll leave notes about what the professionals say with Troz so he can add it to the really large amount of sources that's been compiled for the video. Now, where does TinyBuild come in? TinyBuild offered to extend their services to YandereDev, as any professional programmer would look at the code that he's done and projectile vomit all over the screen. Initially reluctant to have another programmer do a better job than him, he eventually caved and a developer was sent to work on the game, with TinyBuild hopping on board to publish the game should it get released. Good coding is meant to be flexible, quick and efficient, so that when needed, you can make quick optimization edits and make sure the game doesn't murder your Intel Atom processor from 1923. This is what the TinyBuild developer ended up getting up to, optimizing hundreds of lines of code to make sure that the game runs slightly better than it did before that point, which meant removing the depressing amounts of else-if arguments in the code. The partnership lasted a while, with the programmer allegedly redoing most of the code of the game, until he was suddenly dropped with a statement made on YandereDev's Patreon, pretty much saying that the code couldn't be read because it was too simplified and there was a lack of else-if statements to boot, as it would hinder the progress of him making his game. At this, TinyBuild packed their bags and left the project, probably not seeing a completion date for the game this decade or even century. With their departure and the programmers yeeting off the project, YandereDev was now free to execute an extra 2048 lines of code in a single update function to run every single frame, and finish his plan to cause global warming all over again and raise the overall heat of the earth with the amount of fried PCs the game would end up causing over the next few years. But this wasn't the only thing that YandereDev had been accused of neglecting. Nay, he had more trouble under his belt that even more information has been shown as recent as a week before writing this segment, and that heinous crime is stealing assets. Allegedly, it's been stated that he's been stealing assets for his game, and while I wouldn't put it past him to do such a thing, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt in this situation. Throughout the entirety of the development cycle of the game thus far, YandereDev has promised that the models and assets that are currently in the game will be replaced down the line with more polished models from the ground up. The very model for the main character of the game is taken straight out of the Unity asset store, and quite a lot of the assets around the school were taken from various places from the internet. Now, standard development practices list that without a license or specific written permission from the owner of the assets as well as credit, you cannot monetize your game whatsoever. You just got caught using that one font that you downloaded from Thafnine years ago on a used park bench asset that you forgot even existed? Well, too bad, someone found it and now you're thousands of dollars in debt and your game's been banned from every single marketplace ever conceivable. Now, YandereDev didn't want any of this to happen to his game. He was planning on making big bucks and selling it on the biggest marketplaces known to man, and the Epic Game Store. So he promised that the models of the game would change down the line. Now, you guys must have heard from either me or Tro earlier on that YandereDev makes use of volunteers to keep the game going on. He isn't a one-man band, the man needs help. And what better way to get help than with people who are sacrificing their free time in order to provide you with some assets to improve your game? Which is exactly what one artist did for him. On Twitter, an artist named Maika recently made a thread unearthing the turbulent tales of her encounters with the dev. She had improved the character designs of the game to make them 50 times more original than the original concept, providing concept art for Yandere-chan amongst other things. She states that she was asked to modify the in-game model, design posters, illustrate his YouTube skits, redraw another artist's work because he didn't like the quality, design skins, and contribute some props. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, that's a whole lot of work, surely she didn't do all of it. Well, she ended up doing the entire thing and submitted it. Now, before you get your pitchforks out again and blast the artist for working for free, you guys need to understand that at the time she was still a teenager and worked on multiple jobs in addition to trying to build her online presence and portfolio. And besides, it was the perfect opportunity to work with the YandereDev, just as long as she got credit. The video was released, and to the shock and horror of a grand total of no one, there was no credit in the video. She had to email YandereDev to get credit for the work she did, and when she asked, he told her no, citing nepotism as a reason. In this thread, Maika also shows the emails that YandereDev sent her, and I'll just present these without comment. Discounting the melodramatic nature of some of these emails, why does there need to be a back and forth about this? Just credit the artist? Other games don't seem to have this issue, so I don't understand what the problem is here. Especially if the artist didn't ask for payment or anything, just credit. The work that was handed to her was very intense, and that's enough work for a full-time freelancer gig. So the fact that she didn't ask for money in the first place makes it even more essential that you give her full credit for the work she did immediately on publication. All in all, the rampant mismanagement of the game seems to never end, and hopefully there's going to be some improvements to the way the game is run. Yeah, I'm not too sure about that one. But at least this was a fun revisit to the antics of YandereDev. Back to you in the studio.